Okay, 30 is the one. 1.2.30 to 1.4.51. It's something. But again, let me read out that. This is the one. Yes. Navaisa Atma Tam Skritam Saktastrilokyam Bhavan Vasudeva Na Strikritam Kashmala Mashnu Vita Na Lakshmanam Chapi Vihatum Arhati. Since Lord Sri Ramachandra is the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vasudeva, he is not attached to anything in this material world. He is the most beloved super soul of all self-realized souls. And he is their very intimate friend. He is full of all opulences. Therefore, he could not possibly have suffered because of separation from his wife. Nor could he have given up his wife and Lakshmana, his younger brother. To give up either would have been absolutely impossible. Okay. This will be said next time. Tamuvacha tato brahma prahasan munipungavam shloka eva tvaya baddho natrakarya vicharana. Then Brahma smilingly told the best of sages, you have indeed composed a shloka. Do not worry about it. Wait a minute. Okay, fine. After hearing that verse recited by the sage within his mind, Lord Brahma spoke to him, the best of sages. Sri Brahma was smiling that the sage was unaware that the shloka had appeared on his tongue by Brahma's own arrangement, which he will specify now. But Chandalevate Brahman, Saraswati, how do I? Chanda Devate Brahman Pravrittayam Saraswati Ramasya Charitam Krishna Gurutvam Rishi Sarvama. O Brahmana, words of you simply by my desire. O best of the sages, describe all of the activities of Lord Rama. I think you're all influenced by the scene that we are reading. Sitting on the floor, eating an animal and sitting. Lord Brahma clarified that the best of sages, Valmiki, had uttered a shloka, text 15, and was astonished about it. Valmiki had received the potency to compose poetry, for only a true sage can compose true poetry. The implication is composable shlokas like this. In shlokas like this, kindly please mute your audios. For some peculiar reason, I'm unable to mute. Because you are not supposed. Describe all of the activities of Lord Rama, like this verse. Now, following the Kavya methodology employed by Valmiki, actually, in India, there has been a very elaborate tradition of the subject known as Alankar, poetics, which means literary ornamentation. This is the subject that is studied after Vyakarana and Nyaya, logic, when they get into Alankar. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's debate with Keshav Kashmiri was on Alankar. There are so many rules, regulations, and for all of that, Valmiki Ramayana is the gold standard. This is how you write poetry. It's supposed to describe these things. It is supposed to, actually, we'll see what it is supposed to be. It's not like today's. In today's world, also we have drishyas, we have audio content, we have radios, we have audio visuals. So previously, drishyas, sorry, shravyas, we have audio and drishyas, which are audio visual, like movies and TV shows and so on. But there's no basic, it's not regulated the way it is in Vedic civilization. They basically tell you when you write a script, a movie script, it should have these scenes, it should have a natural scenery, it should have this, it should have that, which is already given to us. So in the Vedic tradition of stage performance, Natya refers to stage performance. Bharata Muni has a Natya Shastra, which is coming from Lord Brahma actually. And that is, can you also, will you be able to? Sorry. So there is, for stage performance, there are, one is drama and the other is poetry. Poetry is sung or recited, but it has to be such that it is basically invoking your mind. It's invoking a theater in your mind. So they're already based on Valmiki Ramayan only. They came up with all these rules. There might have been other rules. I don't know, coming from Lord Brahma, but definitely it has a correspondence with Sri Valmiki's Ramayana. So when Lord Brahma is saying, compose like this, it should be up to Lord Brahma's standard of poetry. It should be attractive and it should be educational. It is the ultimate edutainment, as they say in today's world. It should be educational entertainment. Dharmatmano gunavato loke ramasya dhimataha vrittam kathaya dhirasya yathate naradakshutam. In accordance with what you have heard from Narada Muni, describe the activities of Sri Ram, who adheres to Vedic Dharma, possessing several auspicious qualities in this world, and who is learned and sober. Notice that he doesn't even say that I know that Narada Muni told you all this. It's all understood. It's all understood. Which itself implies that he is the one who actually sent Narada Muni. So it is implied here. It is hinted here. Having given a general order to him to compose a book on Ram's activities, he then ordered him to compose it briefly. Briefly. Because compared to Brahma's own Ramayana, Valmiki's Ramayana is very brief. It is only 24,000 verses. Whereas Brahma's Ramayana is Shatakoti, is 100 crore verses. So Rama, the chief hero of this poem, is described here with 4 adjectives. Dharmatmanaha, who adheres to Vedic Dharma. Loke gunavataha, possessing several auspicious qualities in this world. Dhimataha, learner. And dhirasya, sober. It is known that a poem becomes famous by a description of the qualities of a hero. In this regard, Bhoja states that even a slight outpouring of a poet would decorate the ears of the learned if it describes a hero who is supreme in this world and by qualities. Such a hero would have qualities such as being born in a noble family, brilliant, greatly fortunate, liberal, powerful, skilled, and adhering to Vedic Dharma. Dharmatmanaha indicates that Lord Ramachandra adheres to Vedic Dharma. The very word Ramasya indicates that he is both powerful and brilliant. Dhimataha indicates that he is scholarly. Dhirasya indicates that he possesses great fortune as the emperor of the entire world. Loke Gunavataha indicates that he is liberal and possesses other qualities of a hero. In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami has stated, Nayakanam Shiroratnam Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan and he is the crest jewel amongst all heroes. So one of the Vaishnava commentators has explained why does he say that he is the crest jewel of all the heroes? Because the heroes are the Vishnu Tattvas. Only the Supreme Lord and his plenary portions are the heroes. We are not heroes. We cannot even really be villains also. We can at best be some comedians or something like that. That's all. We are all just extras. Just hanging around in a big crowd. Sometimes you see, more or less we are just extras. But the Vishnu Tattvas, they are the heroes. Krishna is the best amongst the heroes. So Lord Ramachandra, being a Vishnu Tattva, he's naturally a hero. So therefore, Lord Brahma, being the supreme Vaishnava within the universe, he has a desire that Valmiki should describe. Present it your way. Write it in your way. He does not micromanage. He just tells him, okay, you do it now. Because Valmiki himself had executed devotion service, Shravanam Kirtanam Smaranam, with such intensity for so many thousands of years that his heart had become enlivened with the desire for devotional service. In Bhagavad Gita also we come across in Baladev Devotion Buddhist commentary that there are actually two methods by which one comes to the point of full devotional service unto the Lord. One method is the direct method. You give up everything and you execute exclusive devotional service unto the Lord. You give up sinful activities, you give up family life, you give up everything basically. Just surrender unto Navavida Bhakti. You may execute any one of them also. That is one type. That's a Nirapeksha. He very rapidly attains spiritual progress. But then there are those who prefer, first of all, to become self-realized. And then after becoming self-realized, then they want to fully engage in the activity of the soul, which is devotional service. So if you cannot directly execute exclusive Bhagavata Dharma, then the next method is, because for that, you're directly aiming at God realization. You cannot directly come to the point of God realization. Then you go step by step. First, you become self-realized, then you fully surrender to the Lord, and then you attain God realization. The second method is the pathway for those who are too disturbed by material desire. Everything. The Bhagavata Dharma can give you, but these people, they want, first of all, purification of heart. They have so many things. So Valmiki followed that method. The method of direct service to the Supreme Lord, not the slow method, the fast method. So Lord Brahma liked the privilege. Therefore, he is ordering it in this way. Describe, as you heard from Narada, indicates that Sri Valmiki should briefly describe Lord Ram's pastimes. Just as Narada has summarized, you will also have to summarize. रहस्यं च प्रकाशं च यद्वृत्तं तस्य धीमतः रामस्य सह सौमित्रे राक्षसानां च सर्वशः वैदेह्याश्चैव यद्वृत्तं प्रकाशं यदि वा रहः तच्चाप्यविदितं सर्वं विदितं ते भविष्यति. All that has transpired in private or in public to Sita Devi. Give me that thing. Yeah. All the people of please. Okay, sit down. It's a simple way to solve the problem. All that has transpired in private or in public to Sita Devi and others, the intelligent Ram, Lakshmana, and the Rakshasas, as well as all that are unknown to you, will become known to you. So now, note this point. Narada Muni had only summarized. Valmiki, through his meditation, would have to discover the rest. That was what Brahma's order. You begin writing, I'll bless you with the ability to get out all these details. Lord Ram was intelligent, which further indicates that there is a possibility that some of his activities were in public, that is known to all, and that other activities were in private, that is, some activities took place without the knowledge of others. Valmiki would also know about the activities of Ravana and other Rakshasas. Similarly, activities of Sita Devi, Bharata, the queens, King Dasharatha, all that Valmiki did not know. The details that Narada Muni did not state would become known to Valmiki. Nate Vagandata Kavye Kachidatra Bhavishyati Kuru Rama Katham Punyam Shlokabadham Manoramam. Your words in this poem would never convey anything untrue. Compose a narration on Lord Ram that is pious, charming, and in verses. So he blessed the sage that he would be able to perceive reality as it is. Now he blesses him that he will perceive everything as it is. Because first you have to perceive everything, then you have to convey everything. It is possible that you may perceive everything and not convey everything. So he is saying that you should do both. In this poem that Rama once written, none of the sage statements would turn out to convey any untruth. Vak and Amrita can also respectively mean word and defective, indicating that none of the words in the poem would be defective. In other words, there would be no defects from the perspective of poetry, no defects in the meaning of the words and statements as far as their correspondence to reality goes. So it would be proper according to the rules of the language in which it is written. It would also be proper in describing the reality that it is presenting. Sri Brahma then states the purpose for which Ramayana should be composed. It should remove the sinful reactions of its readers. Immediately upon hearing the sounds of the poem, it should produce a joy that melts away all other experiences. The entire work should be in verses. It should neither be a prose work nor a work containing prose and poetry. So it should not be, there are three types: Padya, Gatya, and Padya Gatya. Either pure poetry, pure prose, or mixture of prose and poetry. In dramas, we generally come across prose and poetry in the Vedic tradition. If the night something is going on, then they will burst into a song. That we see reflected in Indian movies also, basically extended from the drama tradition. Then a famous verse: Yavasthasanti Graya Saritascha Mahitale Tavad Ramayana Katha Lokeshu Pracharishyati. As long as there are mountains and rivers on the surface of the earth, the narration of Ramayana will be propagated in the worlds. So there's another purpose. This purpose is Lord Brahma's purpose. Valmiki does not desire to become famous, but Lord Brahma has a desire that Valmiki should become famous. Yavad Ramasya cha katha patkrita pracharishyati tavadurhvam adhascha tvam mallokeshu nivatsyasi. As long as the narration of Lord Ram composed by you is propagated, you will reside on earth among my worlds and then beyond them. Since fame is not by itself a goal of human existence, Sri Brahma states the result of that fame in this verse. As long as the Ramayana is propagated, the sage Valmiki would reside on earth as long as his body lasts, and then he would live in the world beyond Brahma's worlds, that is, the Vaikuntha worlds. Ityukva Bhagavan Brahma tatrevanta radhiyata tatasashyo Valmikir munar vismayamaya yau. Having said this, Lord Brahma disappeared right there while sitting. Then Valmiki Muni and his disciples became surprised. So his disciples included Kusha and Lava. Lava Kusha were also there. Bharadwaja was also there. Tasya Shishya Satah Sarve Jatuh Shlokam Imam Punaha Muhur Muhur Priyamana Prahuscha Bhrishavismita. Then his disciples repeatedly sang the shloka, that Ma Nishada, text 15. And again they spoke to each other with extreme astonishment about this. Samaksharais Chaturvirya Padair Gito Maharshina Sonu Vyaharanad Bhuya Shloka Shlokatvam Agataha. That shloka that had been sung by the great sage in 4 lines, each containing an equal number of syllables, now became renowned because of its subsequent utterance by the sage disciples. So in Sanskrit, there's a subject called Chandas, where we learn about different meters. In Sanskrit, the verses are composed according to specific rules, and the verses are of different types. So there is one particular type which is called the shloka. Even though we use shloka in our common language to refer to any type of verse, shloka actually has 8 syllables, and there are further rules. Some have to be. There are further rules on what it is. So, Valmiki Ramayana is made up of shlokas, mostly, not that it's entirely, because at the conclusion sometimes you see longer verses of other meters, but mostly there are shlokas. Once in a while, you come across a whole chapter with longer verses. That indicates extreme distress or something like that. There are situations.
In Uttarakhand also it is like a sloka, many conditions like they say Valmiki has not written.
Oh, there are a number of people who think that Valmiki didn't write the first canto also. They basically have an issue with Lord Rama being the supreme person. And because the first canto and 7th canto are very explicit. Actually, there are statements in every canto. The 7th canto is too explicit, they cannot believe that Valmiki would have written. They believe, first of all, they believe that Valmiki was just, they don't believe in the Puranic information about Valmiki. So it's all this accommodation is correct. They partially accept, partially don't accept. What's the big deal? It is the epilogue. It is the epilogue. Finally, it's coming out. After the drama is over, all the actors come on stage now. So after Ravana is killed, all the things are, all the background is told. Master, I must do some work before I leave after I complete this class. In some editions of the Ramayana, instead of Shloka Shlokatvam Agataha, the text reads Shoka Shlokatvam Agataha, which is nowadays very popular. This would then mean, the verse would then mean, the lamentation of the sage about the female crauncher bird, Shoka, was then subsequently expressed in the form of a verse containing 4 lines, each containing an equal number of syllables, Shlokaha. So, the sage was lamenting about that female crauncher bird, the craunchi. He had Shoka. And then finally he started composing shlokas. Tasya buddhiryam jata Valmikeer bhavitatmanaha Kritshnam Ramayanam kavyam mitrishai kravanyaham. So here, the word shloka can mean a Sanskrit verse that is defined as a shloka by the standard rules of Sanskrit poetry, or a renowned verse. Previously, text 15 was considered a shloka by the first meaning, Manishada verse. But now it was considered a shloka by its second meaning. I wrote this. It is simply, I am made to write by the mercy of Hari Guru Vaishnavas. I'm very surprised. The sage Valmiki, meditating on the Supreme Soul Narayana, then got this idea. I will compose the entire poem, Ramayana, with such verses. The sage then describes how he resolved to go about his composition. This is all Valmiki's deliberation. Bhavitatmanaha indicates that he contemplated on the Supreme Soul, Lord Narayana, Atmanaha. In the scriptures, can you just tell Ashok to make one for
ourselves we can decide. This we can share.
Then you should get another cup of glass. In the Vedic scriptures, in the Upanishads, actually, Atma primarily refers to the Supreme Atma. Primarily it refers to the Supreme Atma because according to the Upanishads, the Paramatma is also inside the Jivatma. So ultimately is the Atma. The body exists and functions because of the Jivatma. The Jivatma exists and functions because of the Paramatma. So ultimately he is the Atma. So from the Upanishads we learn that very often we refer to the Supreme Lord as Atma. In fact, Madhvacharya, he says that by default Atma refers to the Supreme Atma. And if the word does not fit in with the Supreme Atma, it refers to the limited Atma, Jiva Atma. So he had contemplated on the Supreme Soul, Lord Narayan. This further indicates that the sage had invoked auspiciousness as required in the beginning to ward off possible obstacles. The sage resolved that he would compose the entire poem named Ramayana in verses such as text 15. Idrishaihi, like this, indicates that most of the verses of the Ramayana would be in shloka meter. Here and there, Sri Valmiki uses verses of other genres, other types. Like this very verse, next verse that we see. This is not in shloka. Udaravrtartha pade manoramais tadasya ramasya chakara kirtiman samaksharai shloka shatair yashasvino yashaskaram kavyamudarathir munihi. Then the celebrated sage of great intelligence composed a fame-giving poem in hundreds of verses, with each line having an equal number of syllables, all of them with charming and great meters, stylistic devices, and words on the famous Lord Ram. So he carried out this resolution. So the chief goal of a poem, according to the Alankarikas, authorities on how to write poetry, how to write poetic works, or how to make proper stage performance content, is Kavyam Yashase. It is to become famous. The idea is, if you write a proper poem, it will live for kalpas. We will write something and we may just live and die. But if you write some proper thing, it will live long. In Vedic civilization, that is always there. Nowadays, they think how to make New York Times bestsellers. Like it should be sold now. But in Vedic system, they think about how many centuries will this go? How many thousands of years will this last? They think like that.
The lifespan will increase.
No, the book will live. We will die. The book should live. Kavyam, you should say, or fame. Fame means not fame while he's alive. Fame. Of course, a poet who wants to be famous like that is materialistic. But the poem should become famous. And in this case, it will certainly become, because it is done under Lord Brahma's direction. The sage reveals that his poem will become famous. And he reveals that the poem will become famous even before he composes it will become famous. Already Narada Muni has gone to tell Brahma. Already there's a lot of gossip going around that a human edition is coming out. Udara means great in this context. Hence, Udaradhi means of great intelligence, describing Sri Valmiki's expertise. The seed quality of a poet. Muni says thoughtful, indicating that he had the two features of a poet, living in seclusion and being a connoisseur. That means the fame of the kings of ancient times have been reflected on the poetic literature describing them. Even in their absence, their descriptions do not perish. Indeed, the fame that arises due to being the hero of a poem is incomparable to other kinds of fame. Even in today's world, simply if they want to whitewash a character, they make a movie about him or they write a book about him and they portray him in this way, that way, something. And then people start believing that. Propaganda. Books are actually very powerful. Books are extremely powerful. Books are actually more powerful than audio. And you can say that everyone likes audio visual. So there's text, there's audio visual, and there's text, there's audio, and there's audio visual. Audio visual is very attractive to people, but it does not affect your thinking to the degree that audio affects. And audio does not affect you to the degree that text affects in today's world. So people write a book, and one person has said that when you write a book, you give all kinds of arguments, you leave it. That person will never talk to you in the street or in his office and all that. But you've planted all your arguments for everything and put it inside a book and deposited it and given it. He reads the book in his privacy when nobody is looking around him. Then internally is convinced, yes, it's correct. So books are extremely powerful. They change you to a very surprising degree. There are so many closet Hare Krishnas around the world, dressed like non-devotees, karmis, but in their minds they're completely surrendered to Krishna. You come across them many times. Just out of fear of social ridicule and so on, they may not expose themselves. Kavyam, poem, is a product of a kavi, that is a poet expert in describing an extraordinary personage in a manner that is excellent in terms of speech and concept, with ornamentation in speech and concept, and free from defects of speech and concept. A very, very technical subject. Very, very detailed. Very detailed. Generally, we know about the greatness of the Supreme Lord. But literature like Ramayan, they express the attractiveness of the Supreme Lord. So therefore, everything has to be conveyed so beautifully. Here, it refers to what is technically a Mahakavya as defined in Dandi's Kavya Darshan. Sargabandho Mahakavya Muchyate Tasya Lakshanam Ashir Namaskriya Vastun Nirdesho Vapitan Mukham Itihasa Kathodbhutam. Okay, let it go on. I'll just read the translation of this. A Mahakavya is a long poem constructed in chapters. Its opening offers benedictions or obeisances or defines an objective. It springs from an historical incident or is otherwise based upon some fact. It is not pure fiction. It turns upon the fruition of the four goals of human existence. So it has to point out how you can attain the four goals. And its hero is clever and noble by descriptions of cities, oceans, mountains, seasons, and risings of the moon or the sun, through sportings in garden or water and festivities of drinking and love, through sentiments of love and separation, and through marriages, by descriptions of the birth and rise of princes, and likewise through state council, embassy, advance, battle, and the hero's triumph, embellished, not too condensed, and pervaded all through with the moods of rasa, with chapters none too lengthy and having agreeable meters and well-formed joints, and in each case with an ending in a different meter, furnished. Such a poem possessing good figures of speech wins the people's heart and lives longer than even a kalpa. Lives longer than even a kalpa. A kalpa is 1 day of Brahma. You can see with, for instance, Brahma Samhita. Inside that we find Govinda Stuti. Govinda Stuti is offered by Lord Brahma much earlier on. Bhagavatam itself. Or some Puranas describe events from several previous, long time back, many, many days of Brahma back. Okay. Shloka Shatai, in hundreds of verses, indicates that the poem was composed entirely in verses with no admixture of prose, and that it was not a small Shataka poem. Shataka poem means a poem of 100 verses. He will himself describe that this poem was composed in 24,000 verses. And how are these verses? Udara Vitartha Padai, with great meters, stylistic devices, and words. The great meters used herein reflect the rasas, aesthetic tastes expressed in the verses with such meters. The great stylistic devices reveal rasas both internally and externally. These verses are also charming, manoramai. The style of writing employed herein are devoid of harsh constructions of words, words difficult to pronounce, and compound words that are too long. Like Shishupala Vada, famous Shishupala Vada, contains verses which are sometimes difficult to pronounce. Ramayana does not have this kind of these constructions. The verses also contain the same number of syllables in each line. Tadupagata samasa santhi yogam samamadhuro panatartha vakya baddham Raghuvara Charitam Munit Pranikam Dash Shirasascha Vadham Nishamayadvam. Listen to this narration by the sage Valmiki about Ramachandra, the best of the Raghus, and the death of the 10-headed Ravana, using flawless compound words, euphonic combinations, sandhi, and etymological derivations, and composed with statements that are of equal beat, sweet, and with unlimited import. Statements that are of equal beat, statements that are sweet, and statements that are filled with unlimited import. Having stated that he composed such a literature, he briefly reveals that he handed it over to Kusha, Lava, and other disciples to propagate it. So he's saying, you listen to this, which indicates you listen to this and then you are supposed to propagate it. Teaching. So there were, so he wanted to compose a first-class poem, which is meant to be flawless. These reveal the poetic excellences of the text. By repeatedly exhorting his disciples to listen to the Ramayana with his words, the sage had them perceive the events that are recorded in the Ramayana. This will be referred to later on. Chapter 3. Valmiki composes the Ramayana. By the mercy of Lord Brahma, Sri Valmiki directly saw in Samadhi all of the events that had transpired in relation to Lord Ramachandra and composed Sri Ramayana of 7 cantos. So on. Sitaram, Lakshman, Hanuman, everyone. Shrutva vastu samagram tad dharmatma dharma samhitam vyaktam anveshate bhuyo yadvrittam tasya dhimataha. Having heard the entire essence of Ramayana imbued with Vedic dharma, Valmiki, whose very nature adhered to dharma, sought out the details of events that had transpired to the intelligent Lord Rama. In the previous chapter, the sage mainly pointed out the extraordinary characteristics of the author as being supremely trustworthy. He did this to point out that the sacred work Ramayana is to be greatly honored. Now, for the same purpose, he points out the extraordinary nature of the mode of composition of this work. So, in the previous chapter, he pointed out that he had been made extraordinary. He had been made supremely trustworthy. So that is one reason why people should study the Ramayana. 24,000 verses means it's a big work. Why should somebody invest so much of his time, intelligence, and so on? Because he was extraordinary. He was made extraordinary. Then now he is pointing out the method by which he wrote it is also extraordinary. Sage Valmiki's very nature adhered to dharma. How he sought out those details is brought out here. Upasprishtyo the kam samyam munistitva kritanjalihi prachinagreshu darbheshu dharmenam veshate gatim. The sage touched water as per scripture, sat on grass pointing to the east, and with his palms joined in supplication, sought out his goal through dharma. The sage touched water as per scripture, that is, he performed achama. He joined his palms together in supplication while honoring his spiritual master within his mind. He sought out the details of Lord Ram's pastimes through dharma. Dharma means the means to attain auspiciousness. And he endeavored to please Lord Brahma. For dharma is the means to achieve extraordinary benefit. He sought out, because adharma is the means to achieve ordinary benefit. Dharma is the means to achieve something which is easily attainable by animalistic human beings. But dharma produces extraordinary benefit. He sought out his goal. His goal was, he wanted to know the details of all activities connected to Lord Rama and everyone else. He did it through meditation. And he wanted to please Lord Brahma. His spiritual master was Narada Muni, whose spiritual master was Lord Brahma. And he meditated. So the dharma here refers to the dharma of bhakti, smaranam, that kind of dharma. Rama Lakshmana Sita Bhi Ragya Dasharathena Cha Sabharyena Sarashtrena Yapraptam Tatpataha Hasitam Bhashitam Chaiva Gatirya Yacha Cheshtitam Tat Sarvam Dharma Viryena Yathavat Samprapashyati. And by the force of dharma, Valmiki factually observed all the details of the movements of Rama, Lakshmana, Sita, King Dasharatha with his wives and citizens, as well as their laughter, talks, movements, and other activities. He saw the activities of Lord Ram and others in clearer detail by dharma. That is the power of Lord Brahma's happy blessings. He saw in meditation the activities of Lord Ram's war with Ravana and so on. By Lord Brahma's blessings, Valmiki directly perceived these events in yoga, as if through his own eyes and other perceptive senses. So he saw, heard, smelled, everything. Samadhi. Strithatiyena cha tatha yatpraptam charata vane satyasandhena ramena tatsarvam chanvavekshitam tatah pashyati dharmatma tatsarvam yogamastitaha Pura yat tatra nivrittam panavamalakam yatha. He directly saw all that had happened to Lord Ram, the upholder of his promise, while he was wandering in the forest with his brother and wife. And Valmiki, of a dharmic nature, situated in yoga, saw all that had previously transpired to Ram and others, as if it were an amlak of fruit in his hand. Having stated that he had observed all of the events that took place when Lord Ram resided in the city of Ayodhya, he then states that he saw all of the events that had transpired when Lord Ram resided in the Dandakaranya forest. Through appropriate means, he could see all this with full clarity. We find in Bhagavad Gita 7.1. Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, by practicing yoga and full consciousness of him with mind attached to him, one can know him in full without any doubt. This is why everything was revealed to Valmiki in Samadhi. Tat sarvam tatvato drishtva dharmena samahadyutihi abhiramasya ramasya charitam kartamudyataha kamarthak guna samyuktam dharmarthak gunavistaram samudramiva ratnadhyam sarva shrutimanoharam. Having factually perceived all those events by the force of dharma, that splendorous sage readied himself to write a book on the activities of the greatly relishable Lord Ram, a book secondarily discussing sense enjoyment and economic success, while primarily elaborating on religiosity and liberation. Like the ocean enriched with jewels, charming to the ears and minds of all. So on one hand, in today's world, when they want to do a biography, when they want to write a biography, they do a lot. You tell them in the middle of a class. This is rather a message. The result of his meditation was his endeavor to write a book on those activities. Even in today's world, when they have to write a biography, first they do research and they gather all kinds of information. Then the biographer decides what to describe and what not to describe. That is how you heard many biographies of the same person. What to focus on, what not to focus on. Because the raw data that you accumulate may be several volumes of content. When you decide that you are going to present a book which will be 250 pages, 300 pages, then you have to carefully decide, this is what I need. And I will not go beyond this. So here also, Sri Valmiki, first of all, he understands the purpose behind Narada Muni and Lord Brahma. They're all exalted standard authorities on Bhagavata Dharma. Therefore, they all naturally think alike. They naturally understand why Lord Rama appeared. Lord Rama appeared to convince everyone about the importance of liberation. Liberation. Ultimately, you have to live in a Nishkama spirit and tolerate the dualities of material existence. We can see these kind of things very clearly in Lord Ram's behavior. So they understand the Lord's spirit. So when a biography should naturally reflect this purpose. You should not. You can also write some things which go against, like for instance, if you're writing a book about some exalted Vaishnava, and you're not going to focus on describing somebody who prepared ice cream for his guru and then start describing all the flavors of the ice cream in that biography. It's not relevant to the purpose of that saintly authority because he's teaching, he's coming to teach us Vairagya Vidya. Should be in tune with it. So here also we can see that Sri Valmiki, he is clearly selected. So first step, he had resolved to write. Then he saw in Samadhi. He meditated, was shown all these things. So in that way, now he saw. Now he prepared himself. Okay, this is what I'm going to write. This is what I will not write. For instance, the childhood pastimes are not there in Valmiki Ramayan. Very carefully he discusses what to present, what to highlight. Intentionally, he'll be sarcastic in some places. But he will not say it directly. There's a subtext, invisible text inside it. Describe it. We'll see these kind of things. Very interesting. So in this book, you'll see that Arthakama will be secondarily discussed. Dharma and Moksha will be primarily discussed. And Arthakama will be secondarily discussed means the book will go about in such a manner that it will discourage you from Arthakama. The wealth is dangerous. Sense enjoyment is dangerous. You will only highlight those kind of things. And adhering to the principles of Dharma and Moksha, that is very auspicious, very good. So those things will be highlighted. The result of his meditation was his endeavor to write a book on those activities. The sage was splendorous out of an abundance in delight, born out of directly experiencing the transcendental qualities of Lord Ram. Abhiramasya indicates that Lord Ram was boundlessly relishable to the sage in his meditation. What sort of book did he endeavor to write? That is spelled out here. His book would treat Kama and Artha secondarily, not primarily. They would be referred to in his book here and there to demonstrate that they should be abandoned. In his book, Dharma and Moksha would be discussed in detail. This literature would primarily demonstrate the importance of these two goals of human endeavors. So we have Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Dharma refers to attainment of pious credits, punya. Artha to economic prosperity or economic development, as Prabhupada refers to. Kama is sense enjoyment, sense gratification. Moksha is liberation from the cycle, the repeated cycle of birth and death. Therefore, the Ramayana would be comparable to an ocean enriched with jewels. For though an ocean has conscience and bones, it primarily carries jewels. So here, conscience and bones are compared to Artha and Kama, while jewels are compared to Dharma and Moksha. Sarva Shruti Manoharam indicates that it would attract the minds and hearts of all people. The sweetness of its sounds would attract their ears, and the excellence of its imports would attract their minds. He composed this book as per his endeavors, exactly as instructed by Sri Narada. He endeavored to compose this book strictly in line with the teachings of Sri Narada Muni. Dharma and Moksha have been repeatedly glorified, while Artha and Kama have only been secondarily appreciated. That too, they are appreciated only when they are in line with Dharma. When they are in line with Dharma and Moksha, actually. So, yatha katitam purvam naradena maharshina Raghu Vamshasya Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishihi. The powerful sage composed a book that described the activities of Sri Ram, who had appeared in the dynasty of Raghu, just as he was taught by the great sage Narada. And then comes a very long sentence. Janma Ramasya Sumad Viryam Sarvana Kulatam Lokasya Pretam Shantim Saumyatam Satyashilatam Nana Chitra Kathaschanya Vishwamitra Samagame Janakyasya Vivahamcha Dhanushasya Vibhedanam Rama Rama Vivadamcha Gunandasha Rathestata Tathabhishekam Ramasya Kaikeya Dushtabhavatam Vikhatam Chabhishekasya Ramasya Cha Vivasam Ragyashokha Vilapamcha Paralokasya Chashriyam Prakritinam Shadamcha Prakritinam Cha Visarjanam Nishadha Dipasamvadam Sutopa Vartanam Tatha Ganga Yaschapi Santaram Bharadvajasya Darshanam Bharadvajabhyanugyanat Chitrakutasya Darshanam Vastu Karma Vivesham Cha Bharata Gamanam Tatha Prasadanam Cha Ramasya Pituscha Salilakriya Padukagya Vishekam Cha Nandigrama Nivasanam Dandakaranya Gamanam Viradhasya Vatham Tatha Darshanam Sharabhangasya Sutikšnena Abhisangamam Anasuya Sahasyam Apyangaragasya Charpanam Agastya Darshanam Chaiva Jatayor Abhisangamam Panchavatyascha Gamanam Shurpanakyascha Darshanam Shurpanakyascha Samvadam Virupa Karanam Tatha Vatham Khara Trishi Rasor Utthanam Ravanasya Cha Marichasya Vatham Chaiva Vaidehya Haranam Tatha Raghavasya Vilapam Cha Girdha Rajan Nibarhanam Kabandha Darshanam Chapi Pampayas Chapi Darshanam Shabarya Darshanam Chaiva Hanumad Darshanam Tatha Vilapam Chaiva Pampaya Raghavasya Mahatmanam Rishyamukasya Gamanam Sugrivena Samagamam Pratiyotpadanam Sakhyam Vali Sugriva Vigraham Vali Brahmathanam Chaiva Sugriva Pratipadanam Tara Vilapam Samayam Varsha Ratran Nivasanam Kopam Ragavasinhasya Balanam Upasangraham Dishah Prasthapanam Chaiva Prithivyascha Nivedanam Anguliyakadanam Cha Rikshasya Biladarshanam Prayogaveshanam Chaiva Sampates Chaiva Darshanam Parvata Rohanam Chaiva Sagarasya Cha Lankhanam Samudra Vachanat Chaiva Mainakasya Cha Darshanam Rakshasi Tarjanam Chaiva Chayagrahasya Darshanam Simhikayascha Nithanam Lanka Malaya Darshanam Ratrau Lanka Pravesham Cha Ekasya Cha Vichintanam Apana Bhumi Gamanam Avarodhasya Darshanam Darshanam Ravanasyapi Pushpakasya Cha Darshanam Ashokavanika Yanam. Yes. No, give one. Ashokavanika Yanam Sitayaschaiva Darshanam अभिज्ञान प्रदानं च सीतायाश्चाभिभाषणं राक्षसी तर्जनं चैव त्रिजटा स्वप्नदर्शनं मणिप्रदानं सीताया वृक्षभंगं तथैव च राक्षसी विद्रवं चैव किंकराणां निबर्हनं पंचसेनाग्र्यनिधनं सप्तमंत्री निबर्हनं तथाक्षस्यापि निधनं तोरणस्य विभञ्जनं ग्रहणं वायुसूनोश्च लङ्कादाः अभिगर्जनं प्रतिप्लवनमेवाथ मधूनां हरणं तथा राघवाश्वासनं चैव मणिनिर्यातनं तथा संगमं च समुद्रेण नलसेतुश्च बन्धनं प्रतारं च समुद्रस्य रात्रौ लङ्कावरोधनं विभीषणेन संसर्गं वधोपाय निवेदनं कुम्भकर्णस्य निधनं मेघनाद निबर्हनं रावणस्य विनाशं च सीतावाप्तिमरेः पुरे विभीषणाभिषेकं च पुष्पकस्य च दर्शनम् अयोध्यायाश्च गमनं भरतेन समागमं रामाभिषेकाभ्युदयं सर्वसैन्य विसर्जनं स्वराष्ट्र रंजनम चैव typing mistake should be no space before hyphen वैदेह्याश्च विसर्जनम् अनागतं च यत्किंचित् रामस्य वसुधातले तच्चकारोत्तरे काव्ये वाल्मीकिर्भगवान् ऋषिः The powerful sage Valmiki described so many things that should be described. The extreme greatness of Lord Ram's birth, his prowess, his obedience to all, him being the object of love for all, his forgiveness, his pleasing nature, his truthfulness, many other astonishing histories in the association of Vishwamitra, the wedding of Janaki and others. Janaki is King Janaka's daughter, Sita Devi. The breaking of Lord Shiva's bow, the dispute between Parshuram and Ramachandra, the excellent qualities of the son of Dasharatha. So, until the dispute between Parshuram and Ramachandra, that comes in the first canto, Balakanda. The excellent qualities of the son of Dasharatha, the preparations for Lord Ram's coronation, Kaikeyi's evil nature, her obstruction of Ram's coronation, Lord Ram's exile, King Dasharatha's words of lamentation, his departure to the next world, the citizens' lamentation, Lord Ram sending back the citizens to Ayodhya, his conversation with Guha, the chief of the Nishadas, and his sending back his charioteer to Ayodhya, his crossing over the Ganga, meeting Bharadwaj, going to Chitrakuta with the permission of Bharadwaj, construction of a house in accordance with Vastu Shastra, his entrance into the house in accordance with the scriptural regulations, Bharata's arrival and pleasing Bharata's arrival and pleasing Ram. Sri Ram's offering of oblations for his father, Dasharatha. Bharata's coronation of Lord Ram's excellent shoes and residence at Nandigram. Lord Ram's departure to Dandakaranya. The killing of Viradha. His meeting Sharabhanga and Sutikshna. Sita Devi's meeting Anasuya. An offering of sandalwood. It is not strictly in chronological order. Lord Ram's meeting Agastya and Jatayu, his departure to Panchavati and meeting Shurpanakha, his conversation with Shurpanakha and disfiguring her, the killing of Khara and Trishira, of course, along with 14,000 Rakshasas. Ravana's departure means Ravana's departure from Lanka. The killing of Maricha, the kidnapping of Sita, Sri Ramachandra's lamentation, the killing of Jatayu, the king of vultures, Lord Ram's meeting Kabandha, his visit to Pampa, meeting Shabari, and Hanuman, the lamentation of Lord Raghava, the great soul. The lamentation of Lord Raghava, the great soul, near Pampa, his departure to Rishyamukha, meeting Sugriva, creating faith in Sugriva regarding his ability, his friendship with Sugriva, the duel of Vali and Sugriva, the killing of Vali, granting Sugriva the kingdom, Tara's lamentation, the agreement between Sugriva and Lord Ram, Lord Ram's wait during the days and nights of the rainy season, the anger of the lion of the Raghavas at Sugriva, the gathering of the forces for the search for Sita Devi. Sugriva was sending them out in all directions, information about the earth. Lord Ram's granting, I don't think that should be off here, granting his ring to Hanuman. The discovery of the Vriksha cave by the monkeys fasting till death. Meeting Sampati, the elder brother of Jatayu. Hanuman's climbing on top of a mountain, crossing over the ocean. His sight of Mainaka by the order of the ocean and others. The roaring of the Rakshasas. Hanuman's sight of his shadow being arrested. His killing of Simhika. His sight of the mountain range of Lanka. His entrance into Lanka at night. His solitary contemplation there. His entrance into the drinking area. His sight of the inner quarters. This is all when he was in Lanka. Inner quarters means Ravana's inner quarters. Ravana and the Pushpaka. So his sight of the inner quarters of Ravana as well as the Pushpaka Viman. Hanuman's departure to the Ashoka Vanika. Ashoka Vanika is same as Ashoka Vanika. His sight of Sri Sita, his presentation of the ring for recognition, his conversation with Sita Devi, the Rakshasi's torments of Sita, Sri Jata's dream. The Rakshasas is plural, Rakshasas apostrophe. Sri Jata's dream. Sita is giving Hanuman a jewel. Hanuman's tearing apart the trees of Ashoka Vanika. The flee of the Rakshasas, his killing of Ravana's soldiers, his killing of 5 frontline soldiers, 7 ministers and Aksha, and his destruction of the gate, the arrest of the son of Vayu, the terrifying cries on seeing Lanka being burnt, his return leap across the ocean, the stealing of honey by the monkeys. They all ecstatically started stealing of the monkeys when they saw Hanuman come back. Hanuman's consolation of Lord Raghava and granting him the jewel, Ram's meeting the ocean, Nala constructing a bridge, the crossing of the ocean, the siege of Lanka by the night, Ram's meeting with Vibhishana telling him of the means of killing Indrajit and others, the killing of Kumbhakarna and Meghanada. Meghanada is moving. The destruction of Ravana, Lord Ram's recovery of Sita Devi in his enemy's city, the coronation of Vibhishana and the sight of Pushpaka, Ram's departure to Ayodhya, his meeting with Bharata, the great festival of the coronation of Lord Ram, the dismissal of all armed forces, Lord Ram's pleasing his kingdom and abandoning Sita Devi, and something of what would be performed by Lord Ram on earth as recorded in the later part. So the later part refers to Canto 7, Uttarakanda. And there is only some description of, it just gives you an idea of what Lord Ramachandra did because he lived for more than 10,000 years. So only certain events have been noted here. A lot of Lord Ram's pastimes come in various other Puranas and so on. The sage Valmiki then shows in detail how he composed a book on the activities of Lord Ram in accordance with Brahma's instructions. Lord Ram's birth was extremely great because King Dasharatha obtained him on the strength of his great austerities, and he's an incarnation of Lord Vishnu. Sri Ram's prowess is his strength, his ability to kill Tataka, her sons and others. Incarnation of Lord Vishnu and so on simply means that he is a Vishnu Tattva who was descended. He was obedient to all, specifically indicates his straightforwardness. Lord Ram's forgiveness refers to his tolerance of offenses. So he tolerated offenses and forgave those who offended him. Lord Ram was pleasing, not terrible. His very nature is to be truthful. The wedding of Janaki and others refers to the wedding of Sita, Urmila, and other princesses. Urmila Devi is Sita Devi's sister. She was the wife of Lord Lakshman. The excellent qualities of the son of Dasharatha will be discussed in the beginning of Ayodhya Kanda, Canto 2, which will also describe how and why Lord Ram tricked his beloved citizens who had followed him to the banks of the river Tamasa in order to send them back to Ayodhya. So Lord Ram, he cheated them. There are only 2 instances when Lord Ram, he tells a lie. One, he doesn't actually tell a lie, but he does something to deceive. that is these Brahmanas who had followed him. That is for their own welfare. He deceived them. Then the second was when Dasharatha was chasing. Dasharatha reflexively wanted to stop Lord Ram from going. So he ordered Sumantra, the charioteer, stop. And Rama, who was on the chariot, told the charioteer, go. So the charioteer looked by, so who I should follow? I should follow the king or I should follow you. So then Lord Ram said, you come back, you tell that you didn't hear what he said. So that is because Lord Ram considered that if he comes back, if he stopped, let us say he stopped, then Dasharatha would meet him and prevent him from going. Then Kaikeyi would give more archana, so then it will become a bigger issue. And then to solve it again, second time you go, then Dasharatha would immediately die. So to prevent him from a more sorrowful experience, to make sure that he's alive, to protect his life, Dasharatha's life, for his own personal crisis, Lord Ram, even for the 5 situations where you're allowed, one of that is if there's any crisis in your own life. So for his own personal benefit, Lord Ram never speaks untruth at all. Bharata installed the shoes of Lord Ram as the ruler of his kingdom and resided at Nandigram. Anasuya was the wife of the sage Atri. Sita Devi spent time with Anasuya. This incident actually took place before the killing of Virat. Here, the sage Valmiki is not enlisting the events of Ramayana in strict chronological sequence. He is merely summarizing the events here. After meeting Shurpanakha, Lord Rama killed Khara, Tishira, and other Rakshasas such as Dushana. When Lord Ramachandra met Sugriva, he shot an arrow that pierced through sala trees and hit Rasatala. Rasatala is weighed down, and performed other acts to impart faith unto Sugriva that he was fully capable of killing Bali. The sage Valmiki saw the duel between Bali and Sugriva and their heroism. One of the items of the agreement between Lord Ram and Sugriva was that Sita Devi should be searched for in autumn. And Sugriva was so happy he was back in the throne, he forgot all about it. Some editions read Tara Vilapa Samaya, which means Valmiki saw the lamentation and sorrowful activities of Tara, wife of Bali, after Bali was killed by Lord Ram. Information about the earth. This is information on the islands, oceans and other geographical features of the earth. The Vrikshabila cave belonged to Swayamprabha. The monkeys, they went inside this cave. You will come across this later. It comes with Sundarakanda. In order to cross the ocean and reach Lanka, Hanuman climbed on the Mahendra mountain. He met Mainaka, the son of Himavan, by the order of Varuna and others there. Simhika was a female asura. Lanka's mountain range refers to the mountains that held up the city of Lanka. The city of Lanka was on top of a mountain range. Srijata is a daughter of Vibhishana. She had dreamt of auspiciousness to Ram. The jewel Sita Devi gave Hanuman was her crest jewel, Chudamani. When Hanuman tore apart the trees of Ashokavanika, Rakshasi such as Ekakshi and Ekakarni ran away out of fear of Hanuman. This son of Vayu was arrested by Indrajit. When Hanuman set Lanka on fire, the Rakshasas cried out in terror. After Hanuman returned to Jambavan and other monkeys with news about Sita, the monkeys became so ecstatic that they broke into a forest of honey and stole the honey. Hanuman gave Lord Ram Sri Sita's crest jewel. Lord Ram's recovery of Sita Devi in his enemy's city points out the abundance of his promise. He is so powerful that he can go to his enemy, destroy him, and take his wife. In Uttarakhand, Canto 7, there is a description of something of what would be performed by Lord Ram on earth. This is an indication of future events such as Sita Devi's entrance into the earth, his granting life to the son of a Brahmana, and the Ashwamedha fire sacrifice. Most of the Ramayana described events prior to the banishment of Sri Sita. Only a few events after that have been described. These will be analyzed in Canto 7. So in other words, he saw a lot more than what was shown by Narada Muni, what Narada Muni had spoken about. Okay. Chapter 4. Kusha and Lava meet Lord Ramachandra. The number of cantos, chapters, and texts of the Ramayana have been delineated here. After Valmiki compiled it, disciples can take up the task of propagating it. Just then, Kusha and Lava offered obeisances at his feet, begging to be engaged in his service. And the sage taught them the Ramayana. Once in the assembly of some sages, Kusha and Lava sang the Ramayana as instructed by Sri Valmiki, along with stringed musical accompaniment in line with Gandharva Shastra, the Vedic science of music. The happy sages blessed them with gifts. When Kusha and Lava were spotted by Lord Bharata, then reported to Lord Rama, he had them brought to his residence and were respectfully requested to sing the Ramayana. Thus, when Lord Ram and his family members were desirous of hearing from both of them, they began to sing the Ramayana. प्राप्तराज्यस्य रामस्य वाल्मीकिर् भगवान् ऋषिः चकार चरितं कृत्स्नं विचित्र पदमात्मवान्. The enlightened seer and sage of appropriate endeavor, Valmiki, composed a complete descriptive literature with an astonishing arrangement of words on Lord Ram, who had accepted the rulership of his kingdom. So, the extraordinary characteristics of the author was set out in chapter 2. The extraordinary characteristics of the method by which the Ramayana was composed, that's also set up. Because usually when you have to write a book, you just do research and you write a book. Here it's not like that. Here something is happening. He sits and he does meditation. In meditation, he sees things more than what he was told. This is the research he's doing. He didn't go and do a research by talking to people. It's extraordinary. Now, in this chapter, we'll come across the extraordinary characteristics of the book itself, of Ramayana itself. A work is extraordinary when it is composed by a supremely trustworthy person, when its subject is worthy of pious glorification, when it is respectfully recognized by great personalities, and it is glorified because of the hero of that work. This is called intelligence. All these characteristics have to be there. Then the work is extraordinary. It has to be composed by a supremely trustworthy person. The subject of the book has to be worthy of pious glorification, which means those who are pious, more advanced, they glorify. The vast majority, who will they glorify? They'll glorify any person who can. Basically, the fantasy that they want to become, which is that they will all glorify. So their rating has no meaning. And then that writing has to be respectfully recognized by great personalities. It has to be glorified because of the hero of that work. For instance, in Mahabharata, Krishna is, even though he's a real hero, the way it is presented has the Pandavas in the forefront. Actually speaking, Mahabharata is actually a description of Krishna's glory. But the way it is superficially presented, the Pandavas are presented in the forefront. But in Ramayana, it's not like that. But Ram is directly presented by Sri Valmiki, he himself. So the subject of the book is the hero of that book. Now it is pointed out that this work is composed by a supremely trustworthy person and that its subject is worthy of pious glorification. Lord Ram had descended into the Raghu dynasty in order to protect the world. Therefore, he had accepted the rulership of his kingdom. The word Ramasya indicates that his qualities are most pleasing to all. Rama itself means all pleasing. By the glory of this subject of the Ramayana, it is indicated that this poem should be greatly respected, for the wealth of poetry shines due to the glory of the subject of those poems. Double off. Mistake. Vichitra Padam, in addition to meaning an astonishing arrangement of words, can also mean an astonishing place for a variety of literary and rhetorical ornamentation. It can produce several useful results, such as realization, because it describes persons of good character. In other words, it's not just some materialistic stage production, which is just very good, produce good emotion. Even in today's world, how much people think while writing a novel, even writing a biography, to make a TV show, even to make a documentary, they think so much. Because it has to be entertaining, it should be captivating. And then what to speak of making a feature film. So Valmiki, he wanted to capture the audience, capture the audience. At the same time, it should not be compromising. It should be the highest teaching of Lord Ram that should be embedded into the book. Bhagavan, enlightened here, indicates that Sri Valmiki had attained divine knowledge by the mercy of Lord Brahma. Atmavan, of appropriate endeavor, indicates that he endeavored to compose this literature. Only a Rishi can compose a poem, so goes the saying. And the Rishi Valmiki was certainly expert in composing a poem. He composed this literature for the welfare of the world, as noted in the earlier chapter. The sage was of liberal intelligence. From this verse, it is clear that this Ramayana was written while Lord Ram was ruling his kingdom. In order to inform the reader of this, the sage again mentions that he wrote the Ramayana. Chaturvimshati sahasrani shlokanam uktavan rishi tatha sarga shatan pancha shatkandani tathottaram. The Rishi spoke 24,000 shlokas with 500 chapters in 6 cantos and the Uttarakanda, canto 7. This is an approximate listing of the number of verses, chapters, and cantos. The 7th canto has been separately enlisted here as Uttarakanda, as it is the most important canto, Sarvottara, for it explicitly describes Lord Ram's supremacy and his unique features as the one who can award final liberation from material existence. He had previously liberated Jatayu also, but that was in private. Here it is a public demonstration. Here, come, surrender unto me, I'll take you to Vaikuntha. I'm going to Vaikuntha, come with me, that's all. A public demonstration. Therefore, Sri Govindaraja states, it's a very authoritative opinion, that the Uttarakanda is the most important canto. In fact, this is the real reason why Valmiki is simply leading everyone to that point. Text 3. Kritavan tan mahapragya sabhavishyam sahottara chintayamasa konveta prayunjiyaditi prabhu. Despite composing this poem that included incidents that would happen in the future, incidents that were included in the Uttarakanda, Canto 7, that greatly intelligent and capable Valmiki thought, oh, who would memorize this? Here, the sage Valmiki sets the scene to demonstrate that this literature was respectfully recognized by great personalities. The sage was endowed with unbounded knowledge. This poem was composed prior to Lord Ram's Ashwamedha sacrifice. Tasya chintayamanasya maharsher bhavitatmanaha agrihnitam tatah pado munidveshau kushilavau. Then Kusha and Lava, dressed as ascetics, touched the feet of the great sage Valmiki, who was thinking thus while meditating on the Supreme Soul Narayana. Kusha and Lava were actually princes, though dressed as ascetics. They were Lord Ram's own sons. Bhavitatmana, meditating on the Supreme Soul, indicates that Valmiki offered his obeisances unto the Supreme Soul Narayana in order to obtain favorable disciples for his purpose. The two boys touched his feet, expecting to be taught the Ramayana. So here the author is one who has been chanting Lord Ram's holy name for thousands of years, and his first disciples were the direct sons of Lord Ram. And the book is also about Lord Ram. Kushilavau dharmagyau rajaputro yashasvinau bhatarau swarasampannau dadarshashramavasinau. And he saw those famous brothers, famous princes, the brothers, Kusha and Lava, who knew dharma, who were endowed with a melodious voice, and who were living in his ashram. Kusha and Lava knew the dharma of rendering menial service to their spiritual master. As princes, they were filled with prowess. They were famous for practicing various skills. As brothers, their voices were equally melodious, with substantially healthy bodies. And as residents of Sri Valmiki's ashrama, they were objects of his affection. Valmiki considered them fit for receiving instructions. From this, it is understood that the Ramayana was composed after Lord Ram's coronation, as mentioned in the first verse of this chapter. It is indicated that Kusha and Lava were born later. Foreseeing this, Lord Rama left Sri Sita at Valmiki's ashrama. Okay, I think today's quota is over. 1.4.5, yes. Lava Kusha, I have some verses which are attributed to Lava Kusha. I do not, they are customarily recited even by Vaishnavas, but I do not know whether to include them, not include them. But there is a tradition that they compose these. The verses are fully in line with Vishnu Bhakti, pure Vishnu Bhakti. Very interesting. Not here. Sorry. Another place. But again, I'm sorry. Okay, here. Achal Lavakushayor Mangalani Likhyante. So traditionally, it is stated that the following verses were verses invoking auspiciousness, and that they were composed by Lavakusha. Shri Raghavam Dasharathat Majam Aprameyam Sita Patim Raghukulan Vayaratna Deepam Ajanava Hum Aravind Dalaya Taksham Ramam Nishachara Vinashakaram Namami. I offer my obeisance unto Shri Raghava. He is the son of Dasharatha. He is unparalleled. He is immeasurable. Sorry, he is the husband of Sita. He is the right gem in the lineage of the descendants of Raghu. His arms spread to his knees. His eyes resemble lotus leaves. He destroys all the night rangers. The night rangers, night shift people, they are the Rakshasas. Pujantam Ramarameti, Madhuram Mudhraksharam, Maruhya Kavitashakam, Vande Valmiki Kokilam. I offer my obeisances unto the, what is Kokila in English? Cuckoo. I offer my obeisances unto the cuckoo, Valmiki Muni, who has climbed on to the branch of the tree of poetry, and who is cooing Rama, Rama in very sweet syllables, very sweetly reciting these sweet syllables. Valmiki Munisimhasya Kavita Vanacharinaha Shrinman Rama Kathanadam Konayati Paramgatim. By hearing the roar of Ramakatha from the lion of Valmiki Muni, who is wandering in the forest of poetry, who has not attained the supreme destination. Yah piban satatam ramacharitamrita sagaram atriptastam munim vande prachetasam kalmasham. I offer my obeisances unto the sage who is a descendant of Pracheta and who is spotless, and even while constantly drinking the ocean, the nectarian ocean of Lord Ram's activities, is still not satiated or bored. Voshpadi Kritava Varisham, Vashaki Kritarakshasam, Ramayana Maha Mala Ratnam Vande Nilatmajam. I offer my obeisances unto the son of Vayu, who is the central. When you have a necklace, you have a central jewel. What is it called? Dolak. Huh? Something like that. Who is the central jewel of the great necklace of pendant?
Yeah, pendant.
Pendant is the English word. So who is the central gem of the necklace, the great necklace of Ramayana? Who made the ocean into the water that fits into a calf's hoofprint? And who made the Rakshasas into mosquitoes? Which is a way of saying he jumped across the ocean as if we just cross over a small puddle of water. And who destroyed Rakshasas just as you destroy mosquitoes. Anjana Nandanam Veeram Janaki Shokanashanam Kapisham Makshahantaram Vande Lanka Bhayankaram. I offer my obeisances unto the beloved son of Anjana, the hero. This is about Hanuman, who destroyed the sorrow of Janaki, the best, who is the lord of the monkeys, and the killer of Aksha, and who terrified Lanka. Amishi Kritamartandam, Goshpati Kritavar Ridhim, Trini Krita Dashagrivam Manjaneyam Namamyaham. I offer my obeisances to Anjaneya. Anjaneya is Hanuman, who made the sun into a small piece of flesh, who made the entire ocean into a puddle, and who made Dashagriva, Dashagriva is Ravana, into a blade of grass. There is some event in Uttarakhand that is described. That he wanted to swallow the sun or something.
This is a famous.
That is definitely something.
Hanuman swallowed actually.
He swallowed the sun.
Yeah.
That is why his jaw became big. Quran has got a lot of information actually. A lot of information. Anjaneya Matipatalananam Kanchanadrik Kamaniya Vigraham Parijata Tarumula Vasinam Bhavayami Pavama Nandanam. I meditate on the son of Vayu, who is the son of Anjana, whose face, whose jaw is very broad, and whose form is as enchanting as a golden mountain, and who resides at the below the Parijata tree. Yatra yatra Raghunatha Kirtanam tatra tatra kritamasta kanjalim Bashpavari Paripurna Lochanam Marutim Navata Rakshasantakam. Offer obeisances unto the son of Vayu. Wherever there is a description of Raghunath, there, with his hands joined in supplication above his head, he is there. With tears brimming in his eyes. He is the one who destroyed the Rakshasas. Ullanghya Sindho Salilam Salilam Yashoka Vahnim Janakatma Jaya Adaya Tenaiva Dadaha Lanka Namamitam Pranjali Ranjaneyam. I offer my obeisances with folded palms. I offer my obeisances to the son of Anjana, who crossed over the ocean of water easily, and who took the fire of sorrow of Janaki. With that fire, he set Lanka into fire. Manojagam मारुततुल्यवेगं जितेन्द्रियं बुद्धिमतां वरिष्ठं वातात्मजं वानरयूथमुख्यं श्रीरामदूतं मनसा स्मरामि. With my mind, I remember Sri Ram's messenger, the son of Vayu. He is the chief of the Vanara community. He is as fast as the light. His force is like that of the wind. His senses are under control. He is the best of the intelligent. Ramaya, Ramabhadraya, Ramachandraya, Vedase, Raghunathaya, Nathaya, Sitaya, Pataye Namaha. Pay senses unto Sita's husband, our master, Raghunath, who is Lord Rama, who is Ramabhadra, auspicious and pleasing, who is Ramachandra, and who is the original source. Vedas. Vedas generally is used to refer to Lord Brahma, but Lord Ramachandra is the Supreme Lord. Is Vishnu Tattva. From him Brahma has come. So he is described here correctly. Vedavedye pare pumsi jate dasharathatmaje vedah pracheta sadhasit sakshad Ramayana atmana. When the object of knowledge of the Vedas, the Supreme Person, has appeared as the son of Dasharatha, the Veda appeared from the descendant of Pracheta directly in the form of Ramayana. The idea is that whenever the Lord appears, then his scripture, which gives information about him, also appears. So, like when Krishna comes, Bhagavatam comes. When Lord Ramachandra comes, Ramayana comes. They're co-eternal. They co-manifest. Shrinman Ramayanam Bhaktya Yah Padam Padamevava Sayati Brahmanasthanam Brahmana Pujita Sada. By hearing the Ramayana with devotion, even a pada means one line, Padamevava, even one word, then he attains the spiritual abode, the abode of spirit, and he is always worshipped by Brahma. Yah Karnanjali Samputairaha Samyak Pibatyadarad Valmiki Ramayan Galitam Ramayanam Madhu Janma Vyadhi Chara Vipatti Maranair Atyanta Sopadravam Samsaram Sabihaya Gachati Puman Vishnu Padam Shashwatam. Clearly Vaishnava. That person who every day completely drinks through his ears with respect the honey known as Ramayana that has come out of the lotus, which is the mouth of Valmiki, will give up material existence and attain the eternal abode of Lord Vishnu. Material existence has been described here. Janma Vyadhi Jara Vipatti Maranair Atyanta Sopadravam. It is filled with all kinds of disturbances, extreme disturbances, such as birth, disease, other calamities, and death. Valmiki Girisambhuta Rama Sagaragamini Punati Bhuvanam Punya Ramayana Mahanati. The great river of Ramayana has originated from the mountain of Valmiki. It goes towards the ocean of Ram while purifying all the worlds, and it is pure, it's purifying. Shlokasara Samakirnam Sarga Kallola Sankulam Kandagraha Mahaminam Vande Ramayana Arnavam. I offer my obeisances unto the ocean of Ramayana. It is filled with must be Saras. It is filled with the nectar of shlokas, the waves of chapters and the great aquatic crocodiles known as the cantos, 7 cantos. Ramam Ramanujam Sitam Bharatanujam Sugrivam Vayusunam cha Pranamami Punah Punaha. Repeatedly offer my obeisances unto Rama, Lakshmana, Sita, Bharata, and Shatrughna, Sugriva, the son of Vayu, and the son of Vayu. Again and again I offer obeisances. Jitam Bhagavata Tena, Harina Lokadharina, Ajena Vishwarupena, Nirgunena Gunatmana. All glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari, who supports the entire world, who is unborn, who's the very form of this universe, who has no qualities, even though he is the possessor of all qualities. Iti Lavakushayor Mangalastavam Patitva Ramayanam. This is the opinion of one commentator that one should recite this before studying Ramayana. But anyway, the reason I recited these verses is to show that Lavakusha, they are definitely, they were also Vaishnava. It's not that the ultimate truth is impersonal and so on. You don't hear that in Ramayana if you look at things very carefully. Okay, questions?
I have a question, Prabhu.
Okay.
Regarding these books that are from previous kalpa and then available in this kalpa, does it mean that some sage has to recover them to the meditation?
Yes.
No,
Yes. Yes.
is it how Briha Bhagavatamrita was recovered by Sanatana Goswami? Because he couldn't be present when Parikshit spoke to Uttara Briha Bhagavatamrita.
By Brihad Bhagavatamrita, what is wrong with he is a Manjari. He has obviously all the features of a Rishi. Anyone who becomes fully liberated with, in addition to Swarupa Siddhi, if you have Vastu Siddhi, obviously whatever Krishna allows you to see, you see.
What about Jaiva Dharma, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Jaiva Dharma?
Jaiva Dharma, even during Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's time, there is a discussion between, there was a discussion between his disciples. And one disciple told, in the presence of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, in the immediate presence of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And he said that Jaiva Dharma is definitely true because it could have taken place in some other kalpa. That possibility is always there. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur appreciated that answer. From my own research, I can see that Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote a Upanyas. Upanyas means a novel named Prem Pradeep, which is a fiction. And he clearly identifies it as a novel. But he, to the best of my knowledge, he has never identified Jaiva Dharma as a novel. So then what is the need to consider it to be a novel or a fictional presentation of the true teachings of Lord Chaitanya?
Thank you. That's
Yeah, if you say like that, then Naudik Mahatmya has got lot. There's Naudik Bhavataranga, which is his own perception in Samadhi. There's nothing wrong with the literature that are presented as descriptions revealed during Samadhi, as long as that content does not contradict the standard verifiable teachings of the scriptures as understood by standard authorities in Parampara.
So if it's not identified as a novel by author, we should not consider it a novel.
Which one?
If it's not identified as a novel by the author, any book written by the acharyas, we should not consider it as a novel.
That is my policy. I certainly present it as, I have no reason to understand why Brihad Bhagavatamrita should be considered fiction. What is the big deal? Sanatana Goswami is chanting and he sees so many things and then he writes it.
I think Govi Baran Prabhu also, he's writing that in a comment also in the same way.
Yeah, when I spoke to him, he told me, he said that what is the big deal? When you become a rishi, you are allowed to perceive past, present, and future, and many things you are allowed to perceive. And what you see, if the Lord or the Lord's representatives permit you, then you are allowed to communicate it to humanity also. That's what a rishi does. So he said, why Sanatana Goswami doesn't have the power of a rishi or what? What is this?
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy with this answer. Bro, I have another one. When you spoke that said that Dharma and Moksha and the primary focus of Ramayana, what is then in comparison in Mahabharata the primary focus, and why Vyasa didn't have the same focus as Valmiki?
I think Mahabharata is written in order to attract Stri Shudra Dvijabandhunam Trayina Shruti Gochara. It comes in Mahabharata, Bhagavatam. This to attract. Arabta Vyapadeshena Amnayartha Pradarshitaha. Vyasadeva presented Vedic teachings under the pretext of giving the history of the Mahabharata for Dvijabandhus, women, and so on, Stri Shudras, and so on. Whereas Ramayana is presented actually for very elevated sannyasis who are absolutely detached. It is for them. Everything in the Ramayana is like that. It is a moksha shastra. It is not just teaching you, okay, perform dharma and enjoy very nicely in the material world, in this life or in the next life. Whereas Mahabharata is very extensive. Different portions are meant to captivate you and actually harness you. Mahabharata, there is a famous statement in Vishnu Puran. Who other than Lord Vishnu can compose a book like Mahabharata? Because it describes everything. It describes everything. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, everything is there. Bhagavad Gita is there. There is a section called Moksha Dharma, which directly talks about liberation. So it's got things for everyone. Ramayana is not like that. Ramayana, you'll be attracted to Ramayana only if you're serious about things. Otherwise, it won't attract you. One of the reasons why I focused on Ramayana, I thought anyway in Mahabharata, everybody likes Mahabharata. Let me take up something which they're not used to at all. That's why I took up Ramayana. If you're not interested in Sattvic life, you won't even be impressed by Ramayana. It's actually meant for higher purposes, but at the very least, this much.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, nothing. So we'll close up. Vancha kalpataru vyashita pasanti devacha paditana bhavaneshvara vaishnaveshvara namo namaha.